This podcast is sponsored by Teens and Youth in Leadership, CYIL Africa, an organization that is committed to raising generations of young leaders across Africa. Our programs include leadership education, leadership fellowship, research training, webinars, and conferences. Stay informed of our programs by following us on LinkedIn at CYIL and at CYIL Africa on Instagram.
Hello, my name is Israel Idari. I'm a social scientist and a pragmatist. As a social scientist, my research is focused on understanding how youth develop leadership to make social change within their communities and immediate environment. I'd like to invite you to this podcast where I interview and have conversations with scholars and practitioners on their perspective on leadership, followership, and social change. I hope you truly learn from this podcast. Have fun. Today, I'm happy to have Dr. Kaufman, a professor of leadership at Virginia Tech. Thank you so much, Dr. Kaufman, for joining me today.
Oh, I'm glad to be with you, Dr. Orideri.
So how are you today?
Doing well. I am on a research leave this fall, so I'm not teaching coursework, but I'm continuing to apply concepts that are part of my teaching and the work that I do at Virginia Tech, and continue to work with stakeholders and hopefully inspire others to do more research and education related to leadership and followership. So I'm glad to be with you and have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. So let's talk about the idea of studying about followership. How did you start? How did you begin thinking about followership?
Yeah, for me, I started really as a followership skeptic, I think. I had for a long time really been interested in collective approaches to leadership. So really thinking about not leadership from an individual, but thinking about how a group of people might engage in leadership, maybe share that approach and that work, and not so focused on hierarchy or authority in particular positions. And so in that regard, mostly what I was thinking is that people needed to think of them more like leaders. And if they thought of themselves like leaders, we would have better leadership. And although people sort of challenge that in terms of, if everyone is leading, who's following? And I thought, look, it's a more shared, it's more interactive approach to that. We don't have to talk about followership and following. There's an aspect of that culturally within the United States, people are reluctant to be identified as a follower. It really seems sort of in a negative, passive light. And so I thought, look, that's sort of putting someone down if you focus on, what it means to be a good follower, because you're suggesting that they couldn't engage in leadership. But as I thought about that and worked through some different considerations, there were people that I'd seen were writing about followership and the importance of that. And for me, what caught my attention, Ira Chaloff was actually providing a keynote for the Association of Leadership Educators. And I had the chance to ask him a little bit about why he was talking about followership. And for him, there were some important ethical considerations that really informed his courageous follower model. And I realized sort of two components with that. One, there is a reality of hierarchy and authority in different contexts which make a difference. And to realize that some people have the authority to make some decisions in a way that others do not. And so what does that mean for leader-follower relationships, perhaps? And then also on the ethical side, we really need to be careful about even, being fully engaged as a follower, what is generally seen as a positive thing. But if we're not taking a thoughtful approach that involves critical thinking in that role, some ethical issues can happen. And for Ira, the Holocaust was certainly a key part of that, but we have lots of organizational examples where people really did not embrace their follower role in the way that was going to surface some ethical problems before they became problematic. And so that helped me to realize, there's something here, that we need to talk about. The other thing that I know we're going to talk some about the teaching side of things today,
Mm-hmm.
and there were probably two pieces there that helped me in that process. I had started using a book for a graduate level leadership theory course that is the title of the book is a very short, fairly interesting, and reasonably cheap book about studying leadership. And they, I think between the first edition and the second edition, they organized it and had a section on follower-centered perspectives on leadership. And I really liked the book, and I thought, okay, so we'll, use that framing for class discussions. And in that process, several different students, but one in particular, Dalmi Alegbile, really seemed to catch on to the importance of this followership piece, and he credits me for turning him on to followership. But my conversations with him, I was advising him for his PhD program at the time, and I feel like he really helped guide me in my thinking about followership. So all of that is, played into my thinking, and really looking to, where followership might fit in. Appreciated more the work that Ira Chaloff was doing. And he was offering a train the trainer session on the courageous follower model. And so I took advantage of that. And that really helped me to think through where I might integrate this in the teaching and the education that I was doing.
Mm. I was going to thank you as well for introducing me into the field of followership. And do you remember during the Global Followership Conference how I used this illustration that you are a grandfather, Dami Emegbele is the father, then I'm the son.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
the next question I want to ask, as a leadership educator, what has been your experience incorporating followership into what you teach?
Yeah. So I think when we start with getting people interested in leadership, and we have a lot of people that are interested in learning more about leadership, I think to some degree they're open to talking about followership. Sometimes the starting point is they want to know, how do I get other people to follow me? So it's not necessarily followership for themselves, but they're thinking, oh, that must be an important part of leadership, is getting others to follow. And so followership is part of that. There does seem to be, a little bit of resistance that, oh, we need to learn how to follow, or we need to learn what effective followership is. But as you start getting into the complexity of leadership, I think there is a recognition that this is something that is not studied enough. And we start looking at some of the leadership models and theories that have broken down and have not provided the answers that we're looking for in terms of effective leadership. And we realize, okay, followership, may be an important part of that. If you look at the literature, you can frame it, different ways in terms of, where people are studying leadership. And there's some good work, Barbara Kellerman in particular, talking about the leadership system, and others people have picked up on this, that is the leader and the follower and the context. And if you believe that all of those are co-equal in contributing to leadership,
Mhm.
maybe you don't have to talk about followership. But there's a reality that leadership we tend to associate more with the leader. So then how do we bring in these other components of what a follower might do if there's a hierarchical difference there and the context making a difference? So those conversations, I think, have sparked ideas. I think when we can get students started on that path, we can have some really good discussions and uncover, what opportunities they have to continue to grow in their own approach to followership and extending that to others. I was reluctant to name a course, with the title of followership,
Mhm.
but leaning into that ethical component, I collaborated with a colleague at Virginia Tech, Dr. Austin Council. We put together a proposal and piloted a course on ethics and leader-follower relationships. And we were able to pilot that to begin with, and then I took that over independently, teaching that, and that's become a permanent course at Virginia Tech at the graduate
Oh,
level.
that's a
And
good achievement.
yeah, I think so.
Congratulations.
And the ethics side, I think, has really helped. Um, open up the space where people are like, okay, that makes sense. I'll take that course. And so we spend a lot of time talking about followership in the context of those ethics.
Yeah, so while you were proposing this course, did you experience any drawback? If at all, how did you navigate? If you didn't experience any drawback, what do you think was the success to that?
Yeah, I think I didn't really experience much pushback. We had some components of ethics that were important that, helped to ground it. And so people, I think, were open to what that relationship is. There's also been some nice emergent literature to connect to as well. There's a really good textbook called The Essentials of Followership, Rethinking the Leadership Paradigm with Purpose. And so that textbook, it currently is it's in its second edition. That's gone very well. Mike Linville and Mark Renneker have co-authored that, and it's really well done. At the time we proposed the course originally, that was sort of emerging, and I wasn't entirely sure how that would fit. But when I got into that textbook, I realized it did a great job of highlighting followership in a way that people could grasp both the practical components of it and how it connects in with the leadership literature. So all of those things are really useful. We've had a number of other, resources that have been published as people have been focused on toxic leadership and some really negative outcomes of bad leadership. I think that opens up more space for an interest in followership and how that might be able to counteract some of the bad leadership that people are seeing around them. So I didn't really experience much pushback there. Students have been interested, and when they dig into it, they become really intrigued because, for the most part, they haven't heard much about followership, and so it opens up a space for them for curiosity to thrive.
Yeah, so during the class, what were some of the outcomes you saw among the students? Any improvements with regards to the understanding about followership or behavior towards followership?
Yeah, so in some ways, it's just being intrigued and helps them to think about some of their past experiences differently. In some other circumstances, students are relieved that they don't have to take on a leader role in order to help address some of these problems in the world and things that they want to work on. That there are different ways to contribute to that work that's needed. And so followership, I think, really helps with that. I think in some cases it sparked some reframing of the work that they're doing. We have students that are at different levels and from a variety of different disciplines. And so we've had some good discussions in the class. And my hope is that it has helped to shape some of the research or the projects that they've been doing as a result, being able to think through the concepts in that class and to guide them in terms of a way forward.
All right, thank you. So, next question. I don't know if it's up to a year yet, but there was a time you did a 90-second talk at Virginia Tech where you shared about, followership and leadership, but majorly on followership. Could you share your thoughts process or pattern in terms of or how you actually came about this particular talk?
Yeah, so at Virginia Tech, we have a Center for Communicating Science, and they have been for a few years hosting what they refer to as the Nutshell Games. And they have done it with graduate students, and they've done it a few times with faculty. And they challenge these researchers to boil down their work into a 90-second presentation that will be relevant for the general public. And so, thinking about what that might look like, I was recognizing that there's really an opportunity to advance this notion of followership, share with a broader audience the importance of followership. This nutshell talk could be a way to do that. They would create a video, a 90-second video, and I thought that's the length of video that somebody might watch. We don't have a lot of people that are going to sit down and watch an hour-long
Hmm.
lecture.
Yeah.
Even 15 minutes seems too long. But if I could come up with something that was 90 seconds long and use that to share sort of what we've been doing and where we're headed with the work, I thought that would be really useful. They allow for you to have one prop, something visually to display with your talk, not any slides, just you on a stage, and you can have a single prop. And so I thought about that for a while. Okay, what would be a prop that would help convey followership, how it fits or aligns with leadership or the relevance of it? And so I decided this notion of a scissor where you've got two blades coming together, and I was able to get a really large pair of scissors, like is used for ribbon cutting ceremonies, and use that as a prop to be able to talk about how leadership and followership work hand in hand. And if they're working together, we can accomplish great things. But if you take the two blades apart, they really
Mm,
don't work as they're intended. And so, uh, in that regard, teaching about followership isn't threatening to the leader, but it ends
mm,
up being an issue of saying, look, we really got to work on how to collaborate in order to come up with the best approach. So during that process, I continue to work on refining what my definition of followership might be. I had, during graduate school, identified leadership as the process of inspiring vision and hope, and I've held on to that for a while. And then I've since identified that followership is the responsive process of supporting fulfillment of that vision. And
mm.
so it does have to work hand in hand. Followership is not counter to leadership, but it's something recognizing that this collaborative approach can be really important. So that was exciting, a little bit nerve-wracking to be on the stage and to do a live 90-second presentation, but really received some good support through that, and some good views on YouTube as well
Yeah.
in terms of follow-up. And my hope is that it has some long-standing value in introducing
Hmm.
people to followership and spark some ideas about where they might go with it next.
Yeah. Have you had any experience of someone who probably hadn't believed in followership, who watched your video and, got a mental reorientation?
Oh, I did have some good comments, just people that had never heard of it before and never thought of that. And so it was sort of a light bulb moment for different
Mm,
people, colleagues, some of which I've known for a long time, or some maybe have just connected with on LinkedIn, or through some other forums. And so I think that has been useful. And that was part of my thought too, is with 90 seconds, it's not so much that I'm trying to instruct them,
hmm.
but it's I'm trying to cause them to think. And that reflection on the talk can have more value than what I could accomplish during a 90-second presentation. So I've been pleased about that, and my hope is it continues to have value. There's another video that was created, oh, I'd have to look back, maybe a couple of decades ago, but Sharna Fabiano had done an instructional video on the relationship between tango and followership, and had put that together for Ira Chaloff and his work. And people continue to go back to that video and how meaningful that is. Hers was a little bit longer. I think that video might be 8 minutes or so. And so, it's a little bit longer to watch. My hope is a 90-second video
Yeah.
is something that can connect with people, and hopefully people would be able to keep coming back to it. I've used it in my own classes to try to
Mhm.
introduce some students to followership, and my hope is others share it, with others as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So I know like over 2 years ago, we started working on a project together on, followership discourses, digitalizing followership materials over the last
Yeah.
50 years. Do you want to share a little bit about that work?
Yeah, so part of this connects back with even how I came to followership myself, thinking about leadership and really this more collective approach to leadership. One of the models that I really latched onto was Simon Western's Eco Leader discourse. He had mapped discourses of leadership over time, over a 100-year period, the way that people talked about leadership. And the most recent discourse that he identified was eco leadership. And as I thought about that, and where we might look at that, although to begin with, this shared approach, fit with my mental model of leadership. As I was becoming to appreciate more the value of followership, I thought, okay, have people talked about followership differently over time? And could we do a study that would help map that, looking at things that have been published, written about followership, not all academic articles, but that might be a source. And do people talk about followership differently over time? It seemed like we were hearing more interest in followership in recent years than we had decades ago.
Mm.
And so being able to work with people on that has been really exciting. So Israel, you and I were able to facilitate some workshops at some professional conferences and have people weigh in and consider shifts that they have noticed in followership over time. And we were able to put some of those things together and in progress, still trying to do a good job sharing resources about followership and uh, what people can look at and where we might be able to map some of those different perspectives over time. So that article from some of the work that we had done was published earlier this year in the Journal of Management Development, and so people could go and look at that. There's also a LinkedIn article where we've tried to cover that as well. So my hope is that frees people up to recognize that followership is not a static frame of reference, that it's okay if definitions and perspectives on followership are changing over time, because I think historically they have, just
Mhm.
in the same way that we've seen definitions and perspectives on leadership changing over time. And then that maybe opens up some possibilities where someone, maybe they were told, don't ever be a follower, be a leader, and they realize, okay, well, maybe that advice fit the context for a certain period of time, but they don't have to stick with that. That these perspectives on followerships are shifting over time, and we can continue to shape that. So not even just passively, but receiving what the world around us says, but we can shape these perspectives on followership and mold that into a story that helps to advance the important work of followership and understanding that relationship with leadership.
Yeah, thank you. So, with the changing perspective on followership, what content areas do you believe that, when an academia or a leadership educator wants to teach about followership, what content areas should they teach about?
Yeah. And some of this goes back to some of my work with Dami Alegbile. We had put together an article. It was mostly his work really on reconceptualizing followership identity, a useful guide for leadership educators.
Mm.
And in that article, we talked about the importance of framing followership in terms of behaviors and recognizing that this is not something that's a static role that someone as a follower their whole life, but it may be a temporary role that they would have. And so helping to recognize that this is not about the person and who you are, that you as a person are a follower, but it may be a temporary role that you have. And I think that framing helps to unlock possibilities when people realize they're not being labeled as a follower as part of their identity, but it is part of a role that they might play. And so that can be important. Bringing in some of these different references, I'd mention Sharna Fabiano's tango dance is something that can help spark people's interests and to recognize that a passive follower actually is not helping the leader, but we actually need people that are engaged, even when we have clear leader-follower roles. So I think that is really useful. And then also just leaning into this notion that people have been part of a team and they might be following a team captain or they might be following a vision for what the team has been brought together to do. And that can be a really good thing for their success. And so if we start by asking people to lean into these past experiences and frame them in terms of followership, I think it opens up new opportunities for them to learn more about that. Um, in terms of specific curricula, I continue to believe that Ira Chaloff's work on the courageous follower and those behaviors associated with courageous followership are really important. But we're also trying to continue to teach leadership and followership in tandem. So
Mhm.
I think there's some value in that and not really separating it, but actually using followership as a way to enhance our understanding of effective leadership.
Well, thank you so much. So, my final question, if there is anything you want to see in the field of followership, what would that be?
Yeah, I think to start is just increasing some of the recognition of followership and the role that it plays in effective leadership. That's where the scissor example for me works out really well in terms of pairing the two side by side in alignment. It's not as much of a hierarchy. I think in some ways it's useful to recognize that in terms of outcomes, effective followership might even be more important than effective leadership. Now, how do we get effective followership? Perhaps leadership is helping us to create effective followership, to create the space for effective followership, but followership also creates the space for effective leadership. And so before, when I started my journey in thinking about leadership and I was a followership skeptic, my concern was that people were not able to see themselves in a leader role, and that's why they were upset and disappointed about leadership. And they felt like, boy, if I had the chance, I would be a better leader and things would be better. And what my hope is that people realize I don't actually have to be granted authority as a leader in order to contribute to the success of leadership, that I can embrace the role that I have that might be a follower role. And I can use that follower role and the related behaviors to contribute to the positive things that I want to see done in the world. And I can use that role in order to help suppress some of the ethical problems which surface when people are just engaging in passive followership. And so it's, again, still leaning into this notion that the savior model of leadership is ineffective. And in order to work against that, we don't need to have a better leader. We don't even need to have everyone engaging in leadership. What we need is leadership and followership working together in order to be able to achieve these outcomes. And my hope is there's a recognition of that. I see it in different places. There are different models like the United Nations Inner Development Goals, which don't specifically mention leadership. But if they did, my hope is they would bring in followership as an important part of that too, and recognize that in tandem, the two are what are needed to accomplish some of the desired outcomes and face the challenges that our world is facing.
Oh, well, thank you very much for your time, Dr. Kaufman. It's been a wonderful time learning and listening to you again.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Future of Leadership podcast today. If you are here to kindly share, subscribe, leave a review, and follow us across our social media platforms, including Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, all at TYIL. See you in the next episode.